Hello, viewers, and welcome to the Wise Woman podcast. We are here for another episode. I say this every week, but I get excited every time I have guests come on because I love the people that I meet. I love when they share their stories. And most importantly, I know that someone is going to be blessed by watching today's podcast. And it's going to be amazing. Have a wonderful lady, wonderful woman of God. She's just absolutely inspiring, and I'm really excited to be connected with her, and I know God's going to do great things. But before we dive into today's topic of leading an intentional life, wow, that sentence alone is packed, and we're going to try and unpack that in the podcast today. Do me a favor, kindly share, copy the link to a friend, to a sister, your mother, your brothers, your father. Everybody needs to hear today's podcast. I think coming up to the end of 2024, this is the kind of message you need to hear going into a new year when people are making resolutions, you're making changes, you're thinking about improving your lifestyle, and most importantly, living on purpose with God. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome my guest for today as we dive into today's topic and really start to unpack how we can live a more intentional life. Help me welcome Dr. Nkechi as we come on stage.
Show.
Very,
very exciting. So hello everyone, I'm Dr. Nkechi. I'm quite a few things, so I wear quite a few hats, and I'll just talk about some of them here.
Please introduce yourself.
I'm a writer. I wrote a book called Sparkle, the ABC of Smarter Living. I also coach. I also have quite a few charitable endeavors. So I'm involved in quite a bit of charity, mainly around causes that are very dear to my heart, such as women, homeless health, children, so many other areas, which are quite a bit too numerous to mention here. I'm also a Christian. You can see that I've got a collar on. I'm a deaconess. I'm a deaconess, and obviously that's why I've got the collar on. I'm also a seroptimist. Seroptimists are part
What is that? Who are they?
Who are they? All right. So some people use the term girl guides for women. Some people use that term. So basically, it's a worldwide organization where people are just really passionate about the rights of women and girls. It's a worldwide charity where we are advocating for the rights of women and girls, and it's been around for over 100 years. So
wow.
It's in different countries and different continents. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You wear so many hats, and it's so good to have you here. I'm really excited about having you here because I know you can help us exhaust today's topic of leading an intentional life, intentionality. Let's start with your book. Talk us through your book, Sparkle. What's that about? Let's dive in straight there. Let's go straight into the book.
Wow.
What's the book about? The ABC of smart living. I read some of it, but I want to hear it from you. I was inspired. I went to order it from Amazon. I was like, wow, this book loaded.
Okay, all right. So shall I start with why I've actually written?
I was about to say, what was your inspiration for writing the book?
Yeah, so I suppose to start with, I'll say that I'm really passionate about people and communities achieving their full potential. And I don't think that's possible if people are not living smarter, more intentional lives. So I really want to support people, particularly women, to live a more balanced life, navigate life intentionally, aligned to their purpose, and with self-care. And when I say self-care, it isn't just what we sometimes call the maintenance, like having that all of that. It's all the ramifications of health. So whether it's your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health, your emotional health, all of that is very, very important, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. You need to look after you. And I suppose the other thing is that there are record numbers of women experiencing burnout because they're trying to be all things to all people. Now, that's
Yeah,
just not possible. And it
yeah,
doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to live life by default. We can make conscious decisions about how we show up. We can live in a way that's more aligned to our purpose and actually why we're here on this.
yeah.
And when you think about purpose as kind of that intersection between, our strengths, our values, our passions,
Mm,
inform your life experience, that should help inform our priorities and where we put our time and our energy. And
I
obviously
love
it helps
that.
to clarify those priorities and those preferences. Um,
Can
so
I
why,
ask,
yeah,
was
go
that
on.
something you were struggling with, or is it something generally that you just noticed that the group, the women were struggling with kind of just balancing life and focusing? Or at what point did you say, I need to write about this? Did it come, was it birth from you, what you saw, an experience?
I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah,
So we've all been there, haven't we?
yeah.
Where you want to be the best wife, the best mother, the best grandmother, the best niece, the best
Mm,
auntie, not necessarily the best version of you. Um,
mm.
so I think
I
it's
love that.
a bit of that, and also because I see balance as quite a dynamic thing. I don't think you ever come to a situation where you say, "Ta-da! I've achieved balance." It's a bit like when you're cooking on a cooker and you've got, the four rings on your
Yeah,
cooker.
yeah,
Sometimes you might be doing the rice and that needs to be done a bit faster, so you might turn the heat up a bit, and then you might
yeah,
have, your onions in the back burner, you kind
yeah,
of turn that down a bit while you're focusing on this. So it's almost a dynamic equilibrium. But
yeah.
to achieve that, you need to be clear about what your priorities are. What's your purpose?
Mm,
What
I love
matters
that.
to you? And if
Mm,
you don't have that, then anybody might say, well, actually, regardless of what you're cooking or what meal you're trying to make, I think you should turn up the onions.
yeah,
You should turn up the potatoes. And
yeah,
doesn't always work. And because modern day life, there's so much, busyness, distractions, you've got the whole wants versus needs, you've
yeah,
got consumerism, we're all on this hamster wheel, where
yeah,
we're running. If you don't have some kind of North Star that you're working towards, that's helping to organize all of that, it's really hard because life, after all, is a series of decisions. And if
yeah.
you're not really making decisions and life is happening to you rather than you happening to life,
Controlling life. Yeah, yeah,
it's it's really, really hard, isn't it? So I thought, living smarter, navigating life more intentionally, there's so
yeah,
many benefits, aren't there? So I thought,
yeah,
unleash your potential, going back to what I
yeah.
said at the beginning, and your inner sparkle, ta-da.
I love the title.
Focus, alignment with purpose. I also talk about the concept of getting to the palace. And what I mean
Mm,
by this, obviously, in a Christian context, obviously,
yeah,
there's Queen Esther in the
yeah,
Bible. And remember, she went through a period of pruning with
yeah,
Mordecai, her uncle. And it was only when she went through that period of pruning that she was able to get to the palace. And actually, that
yeah.
was her purpose,
She was
basically.
prepared.
Without
Yeah,
Exactly, but without doing that smarter living, that
yeah,
preparation, obviously she wouldn't get to the palace. So what's
yeah.
our equivalent of the palace? I mean, we may not all marry kings like Esther, but and remember, marrying the king wasn't necessarily her ultimate purpose. Obviously, she
Yeah.
she
It,
saved her
it
people.
led her to her purpose. She had to be in the right place of power. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And there's also something about having more time for the people we love, the things we love doing,
Mm,
and then being surrounded by people who actually enrich your life. And actually, you can enrich theirs and thrive. And then there's
mm.
something about kingdom stewardship as well of the resources that we're given.
That's a
So
lot there.
I
You've
know.
packed it up. Let's start. Let's unpack that a little bit,
Yeah.
and
Let's do
let's start from the beginning. And I love what you said earlier on about you might be wanting to be a better mother, a better sister, a better
Yeah,
wife, but it really does come down to being a better you.
It's a
When we
beautiful.
and sometimes we forget the second commandment is like the first. Love your neighbor as yourself. People are
Exactly.
busy loving their
Yeah.
neighbor, loving your kids, loving your family, your husband, everyone. But
Yeah.
the self part that God says, love him, but then love yourself so you can love others right. And I feel like that's what this book reminds us of, because women, we feel like as much as we're here to serve and give of ourselves, you
Mm.
can't pour from an empty cup, as you said. So how can we begin to bring balance? And I love what you said. Can I read this quote from the book? I love what you said.
Please
It
do.
said, my aim is to help you survive and empower you to thrive, unlocking your full potential of your journey towards a brighter, more fulfilling existence. Some people just going through their day. I've got to
Yeah.
take the kids to school. I've got to get to work. I've got to, and like you're constantly, like, my husband's coming home. I've got to cook. I've got to look nice with and all that in heels, looking fabulous and gorgeous. And you're thinking, whew, at the end of the day, you go to bed, you wake up and you do the whole routine again.
All over again.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I earlier on this year, I said to myself, something has to give. I started putting things down. I was
Mm.
doing so much. Every minute of my day was filled with an activity. I was helping this person, doing
Yeah.
that person,
Yeah.
doing this, that person, doing stuff for myself. And I just said, something just needs
Mm.
to give. How can we begin that process of prioritizing? What is the first step for us to not feel guilty and just to say, you know what? This is actually what matters. How do we identify those priorities and just say, this is actually what matters? And that's the beginning of us starting to live smarter, is to identify what's important.
Absolutely. What matters to you, basically?
Yeah.
What matters?
Mm,
Really important question. And within the book, I talk about something called the ABCD
yep.
framework,
Yep.
where A is for accept and assess. And obviously, we all need to accept that we're not super women. You
Yeah.
know, we can't do everything, basically.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're going to need to ask for help. And for some people, they think it's almost an anathema to actually ask someone to come in and help them, either to help them do the cleaning so they can focus on something else, or to help them do what they.
Yeah.
So I think about myself, for example. You know, I love gardening, but it's not all aspects of gardening that I like. So, for example, you know, mowing the lawn and all of that, you know, I'll get
No,
someone
thank you. I get
to
someone
help,
to come and do that for me.
to help me do that. And then I've got a bit more time to focus on, you know, tending to the shrubs, you know, planting things. And that kind of fits with my kind of
Yeah.
nurturing personality, where I like to nurture, help people to achieve their potential, help people to be the best that they can be, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, which is kind of one of the reasons why I actually trained as a doctor in the first
Mm,
place. So if you think about that ABCD framework, and the A being accept and assess, obviously accepting that, you know, you need to embrace your current circumstances and actually
mm,
practice a bit of self-compassion. It's
yeah.
okay to not be perfect
Yeah.
at everything. I like
Yeah.
to think about progress rather than perfection, you know,
I love that.
is the way
Yeah.
forward. And then I
Yeah.
suppose the other A is assess. So you need to just be slightly ruthless with this one. So just assess
Mm,
how you're using your time and your energy right now.
yeah.
And sometimes I'll just do a number of check-ins with myself and just look at things, sometimes over a week, over a couple of days. How am I
Where you
using
spend
my
time.
time,
Yeah.
and energy, even money? I'd see money as a form of
Yep.
energy sometimes. And I was like,
Yeah.
how am I using all of that? And then it just gives me a bit of a long list of some things I probably just need to rethink. I'm not sure that's a priority right now. So just going back to remember those 4 rings of the cooker. Sometimes things
Yeah.
are on the back burner while you focus on, you know, other things. You might have a massive deadline at work. Obviously, that's going to be the focus. You might be expecting a baby. That has to be the focus, you know. So it's just
Yeah.
making sure you've got that dynamic equilibrium just right for yourself and the season
Mm,
of your life that you're in.
mm.
So that's a bit of a start. I suppose the other things, just to quickly go through the rest of the
Yes,
ABCD,
please do. Yeah.
is B for boundaries and values. So you kind of need to define your personal boundaries and your core values.
That's so powerful.
Absolutely, because it empowers you to make decisions aligned with your authentic self, and actually your overarching life goals. Because how many times have we said yes to people but no to ourselves? And I just think sometimes we need to redress that balance. It's okay to say
Yeah.
no. No can be a
Yeah.
sentence. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be no because a zillion reasons why I've just said no.
Yeah. It's just, I just don't, yeah. So no. Yeah.
It doesn't serve me right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
serve me right now. And it's
Yeah.
okay to be clear about that. And it's like a muscle, it gets better with time, gets easier
Yeah.
with time,
Yeah.
saying that no. And then obviously C is for, community connections, because there is something about exploring the significance of cultivating meaningful connections,
Yeah.
nurturing that supportive network, helping us to recognize the collective strength and enrichment that community brings to our life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like to think about that in terms of concentric circles. So where you've got yourself and then you've got all these circles. And the
Yeah.
fact that someone, and I know this might be a bit deep, so hold on, viewers. The fact that someone might have a title, and you might think because of that title, I'm going to put them on the innermost ring. It's how they show up in your life. So for example, someone might be sister, for talk's sake,
Yeah.
and how they show up in your life is not necessarily adding value to your
Value. Yeah.
purpose. And you might think, well, actually, they're showing up in this certain way, so therefore I'm probably going to think, that they need to be in this other ring over here, not necessarily the innermost circle.
Yeah.
Some of these are hard decisions.
I have a friend, and we call it the circle of trust. The innermost circle is the circle of trust.
Yeah, exactly. So, but obviously there's space for us to actually nurture some of those connections and build them. So we need to think about how we nourish that community and not just nourish it when we think, oh, we're just about to need something from people. It's an
Yeah.
ongoing thing, basically, and very intentional.
Yeah.
And then the D is decision making, because there's no point doing all of that. I mean, you don't make some actionable decisions
Concrete.
about
Yeah.
how you move forward. So that's in a nutshell, the ABCD framework. But within the book, I go into a lot more detail and give
Yeah.
some practical examples of each of those.
I'm really excited to finishing the book myself. And thank you so much, because I feel like, where do you identify in our formation? We go to school, we learn to read and write, we go to college, they teach us about getting an education, but I always feel there's never enough life skills.
Yes,
and if your parents aren't the kind of people who think about personal development, because a lot of us grow up in environments where our parents are under pressure, they're just trying to feed their children. They themselves are just thinking about focusing on taking care of the family. They never really have time to kind of sit down and think about you as a person, other than getting a job, so it's that whole nurturing of the person, the intentionality of be self-aware, learn to develop certain skills. If you have great parents, I think that's the job that some of the greatest parents do. They equip you with the kind of skills that enrich your values and your personality. Not just, oh, let's just go to church and pray this, but intentional skills that make you think, actually, what are boundaries? Who has ever sat down? No one in my life. I learned about boundaries later as an adult by having my boundaries constantly violated.
Wow.
And I didn't realize it was a lack of me identifying those boundaries, that I was constantly getting hurt, constantly finding myself in situations where, why is these things always happening to me? People taking advantage of you, people think you're a walkover, and people assume that your niceness, your meekness, thinks that they think you're stupid. But in my mind, thinking, why would somebody? So it meant that for a long time I wasn't asserting my boundaries. I had them subconsciously, but they existed in forms of, oh, I wouldn't want anyone to talk to me in a particular way. And when they did, I wouldn't address it. So now it became, they violated it, but I never either didn't have the confidence or the know-how to say, you've actually violated. And you don't even use the word, you violated my boundaries. Just like, I don't like being spoken to like that. That is you asserting your boundaries without saying. So you need to know. And I also say, I identify them as trigger points. What would someone do to trigger me? Like, and that's cause a reaction, cause an upset, cause me to be angry.
Exactly.
That's a violation of a boundary. Now you've violated something that's very
Mm.
important to me. You've hurt my emotions and my thing. And people don't necessarily consciously sit down and think about what are my boundaries. I think that that helps in fostering healthy relationships.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
actually, your values will help inform what those boundaries need to be, because the boundaries
yeah,
is actually about protecting your time, your person, your energy. I mean, look at these wonderful palaces and the great
mm,
houses, stately houses that we see. They all have houses, walls around them, don't they? To
yeah.
protect them.
Keep people out. Yeah,
Think about those walls as boundaries, protecting the wonderful, works of art, the brilliant things that are within those stately houses. Think about yourself as a kingdom, palace, stately house
yeah,
to be protected. I mean, it's one way of actually explaining the concept of boundaries. The other
yeah.
thing is obviously, some of the things that we do and we experience in our working life, sometimes they are translatable to
Mm,
our personal life. So we have
yeah,
meetings, we have groups, we have terms of reference for those meetings, we have
yeah.
terms of reference for those groups. What about terms of reference for how we expect people to show up in our lives and how we
Life.
expect people to
Yeah,
deal with us?
yeah,
It's just one way of explaining it, just
yeah,
so people understand it a bit more and understand why it's so important to protect our time and our
yeah.
energy.
And because we don't, and I think the topic is paramount because it's the intentionality. If you want to
Yeah,
live life well, everything has to be clear and intentional, right? These are
absolutely.
the things I want to see happen. And like you rightly said, not allowing life to happen to me, but I want to see these things happening in my life. This is what I feel God is doing in my life. This is what I feel called to. And that whole thing, and I think about Solomon when he was made king, he didn't ask God for money. He didn't ask God for
He
the
asked for
life of his
wisdom, didn't
enemies. He
he?
asked
Yeah.
for wisdom, knowing how to do
Yeah.
life, knowing how to govern. And I think some people, especially as Christian women, we feel guilty when we, like you rightly said, say no, when we stand up for ourselves. Some of us are made to feel guilty when we have to address certain things in an assertive way. And obviously, you can be assertive without being rude, without being condescending. It's fine. So I think the whole idea of,
How? It's the
yeah,
how you do it.
yeah, how do I open my mind and my life up to being one, self-aware, and two, being intentional about the things I want to see happen in every area of my life.
Absolutely. And if one of your values, for example, is compassion, that will
Mm.
show in how you enforce those boundaries.
Yeah,
So, for example, you might have an auntie that's always on the phone asking for one thing or the other. And your way of saying no, if she's asking for, let me pick a currency,
yeah.
100,000 naira, for example. Da-da. If she's asking for 100,000 naira, you might say,
Yeah,
well, auntie, I've got, some other things, projects going on. I can send you 20,000 naira, for example.
yeah,
It's a
yeah,
form of no. It's a form of
yeah,
no.
yeah,
It's how you do it, basically. And
yeah.
just being really compassionate. But some people, obviously, that doesn't work, and you just need to be a bit firmer.
Mm,
And you need to do what's right for you. It's really important.
I love that. I love that. So how can we, so number one, so how do we set our priorities? What is right for us? Where do we get that information from? How do we decipher what is important to me? Because sometimes, for instance, our parents tell us, "Oh, go and get married, have children." That might not be your own priority, but then it might be important to you, but just not yet. And sometimes we take on the burdens and the ideas of other people. How do we identify our own priorities and make sure that we regulate our lives to serve those priorities first? What are some of the steps? Because some people haven't identified their priorities. They just, as you said, rightfully just living. They haven't sat down and said, what's
Mm.
important to me? They haven't written it down. They've got no idea what their priorities are. That's why they're easily pulled in a million places. Nobody's actually said to them, you need to sit down and identify what are what matters in life to you? What is the thing that if you don't do, I identify it like, if I don't get this done today, I'm going to be upset about it. So that becomes my priority for the day, whether it be something to do with work, whether I absolutely must go to the gym, I'll make it happen, whether I absolutely must see my mother. So every day my priorities shift. And then there's the bigger priority of my life. If I don't achieve these certain things, I don't want to look back. Someone said to me that, I can't remember the exact phrase he uses, but he said something along the lines of, the pain of regret is stronger or harder than the pain of trying, right? So if you're trying and you didn't achieve something, the regret of not actually doing anything, not making an effort, looking back, you get older and think, wow, that I didn't even, you're rather off at least trying as opposed to regretting that I didn't even give myself a chance. It's worse when you regret not doing something as opposed to you trying and failing. At least you know what, I tried and you didn't give yourself a chance. How can we identify what is ultimately important to
Yeah.
us?
I mean, I suppose when you, as I said earlier, when you think about purpose as that kind of intersection, isn't it?
Yeah.
Between our strengths, our values, and our passions, informed by our life experience, that helps us to inform our priorities and where we should put our time and our energy. It also helps us to clarify, our preferences and what we need to be focusing on. And some of
Mm,
these things, it's quite a bit of thinking. It's just sometimes
mm,
repetitively going through that ABCD and just being
yeah.
really clear that actually I need to streamline a number of things and not
Yeah.
focus on them. Some things will really have to go while I focus on some other things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a bit of a journey. It's not necessarily an overnight thing. It certainly hasn't been for me, but with
Mm,
time, with me being clearer about what my purpose is, why I'm here, the kind of things
yeah.
I need to focus on, it's easier to put things aside that don't necessarily align, with that purpose and things that I
Yeah.
need to be focusing on in my life.
I
So
love it.
it's just being really honest with yourself and sometimes,
Mm,
slightly ruthless, looking through that long list of things uh,
yeah.
that, come into life. Otherwise, you're like a leaf
Yeah.
that's being
Yeah.
blown around like the wind and not really
Yeah.
sure where you need to be or where you're
Yeah.
going. And we can't afford to be like that because there are just
Mm,
so many distractions to
so many
blow us off
roads.
that leaf,
Yeah.
you know, left, right, and center. And then, going back to that ABCD, it's worth taking the time to just do little bit of a review of our
Yeah.
lives, go
Accept and
through.
assess.
Absolutely. And then when you think about the fact that, when you're living smarter, navigating life more intentionally, there are these things that I call, the sparkle enablers. So as well as the ABCD, there are things that actually help all of that
Yeah.
happen and happen smoothly. So you've got leadership development. So whether it's your own
Mm,
leadership, the leadership of the people around you, it's self-care, having a glow up plan, and I'll come to the glow up plan in a minute.
yeah.
It's time and energy optimization, it's stress reduction, smart technology.
Mm,
There are lots of smart things these days that really help us. So whether it's Alexa, whether it's, smart fridges, all sorts of things, really, really
yeah.
helpful. Emotional intelligence, mindfulness, being really careful and clear about how we spend our time. I mentioned, having a glow up plan.
Yeah.
That's something that's really helpful. So it's things like nutritional wellness,
Yeah.
how we eating, what's in our diet, sleep hygiene, how long
Mm,
are we sleeping. Don't be one of those people that sleeps a couple of hours and that's it, because
yeah.
in the end, there's time management as well. There's
Mm.
financial wellness, and I
I need to
go
work back down time management.
exactly. I go into all of this in a bit more detail in the book, all of these things that I've just mentioned. So I mentioned financial wellness. So there's
Yeah.
stuff about budgeting within the book. There's relationship nourishment, So not just being transactional with our
Yeah.
relationships and waiting to need someone before we actually even speak to them.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. So there's something about how we also nurture our creativity, because that helps us.
Mm.
And then, of course, environmental wellness. How often have you gone for a walk, in the lovely greenery, in the fresh air,
Even
observe?
prioritizing that, thinking about doing, people don't, in our community, I feel like we're just so focused on family and work. And sometimes, and like you rightly say, those things are overlooked, how important it is
Yeah.
for our mental health. And we know in recent years, the topic
Yeah.
of mental health has been at the forefront, and people are starting to realize mentally and emotionally, people need to be stable in order to live.
Yeah.
And I feel like people are living under trauma and they don't even know it. They don't even know they're trauma responding to life, and it's become normal to live life under immense pressure, and just, and that's when you just break at some point. It's like, this is just too much.
Absolutely. And it's okay in some, types of circumstances to seek help, to have
Yeah,
counseling. Um,
yeah.
it's also help to have, it's okay to have that helping hand sometimes
Mm,
to navigate some questions that you might have. You might, have be at a transition in life
mm,
where you need
mm.
some coaching, you need someone to kind of very gently take you by the hand and walk through some of those areas. So for example, like a
Yeah,
coach, one of the things I do is I coach. And a
yeah.
lot of that is actually, asking the right questions. Okay.
Mm,
So given all these things that are happening at the moment, what do you feel? Where do you think you want to go? What do you think you want to do next? And sometimes
yeah,
you need, it's a bit like a midwife. So the midwife
yeah.
obviously placed that baby
Hmm.
in the uterus, but the midwife can help that baby to be delivered safely.
Yeah,
So it's just
yeah.
knowing when to, ask for a bit of help and a bit of support, particularly around life transitions.
On that note, I was going to say as well, how do we start to actively change? Because no, we've accepted our current situation, we've assessed our lives, and we know that, I can't go on like this. And change can be very uncomfortable when you're used to doing
Yeah,
something. It's become a habit, it has become a routine, and we don't realize that we need to change until pressure. I think someone mentioned that it's pressure that tends to cause us to change. When you're pressurized enough, like if you're in a long-term relationship and you're constantly being abused, you only ever really leave when you get to the point of, I actually can't do this anymore. Like your own pressure points, or they say people walk out. Is this for someone? So I'll just leave him, did I leave her? Blah. But you're just, you haven't reached your pressure point yet. So how can we learn to train ourselves to know and to act on the change that we need without waiting for breaking point? This isn't good for you. You can't be going on like this. There's a disconnect between your knowledge and your doing, and choosing yourself and knowing, I need to walk away from these unhealthy habits, these unhealthy relationships, the job that you hate going to, but you think
yeah.
you're stuck
Mhm.
in your mind. Oh, I have to do this job. I have to do this. Where do we change that whole prison in our mind? How do those walls begin to fall down?
So some people will need some very concerted help, for
Yeah.
example, coaching, because that helps with the accountability. Like,
Hmm.
you can work with a coach to set some accountability objectives, couple of weeks in, this is what I need to have achieved. This is where I need to be going. But there is
Yeah.
something about, I call it walking towards the light, because if you're clear on
Mhm.
your purpose and what you're trying to achieve, for me, that has made it much easier for me to say no to certain things and to say
Mm.
yes to others. So
Yeah.
because I'm really clear about what my purpose is, it's made it much easier for me to kind of walk towards that light. And because I'm really clear about what the benefits of living smarter and
Yeah.
navigating life more intentionally are, and just to
Yeah.
rehearse them again, obviously I'm unleashing my potential and my
Yeah.
sparkle
Yeah.
focused. I'm aligned with my purpose.
Yeah.
I'm getting to my version of the palace.
Yeah.
I've got more time for the people that I love and the things that
Yes.
I love doing. I'm surrounded by people who enrich my life, and I
Yeah.
can enrich theirs, and I can thrive. And I think I'm a better steward of kingdom resources that have been placed.
Mm.
So I think it's all part of that light that kind of draws you forward when you
Yeah.
see all of those benefits. And if you feel actually I need some kind of accountability, sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's a peer group, people
Yeah.
who support you. It's a bit like Weight Watchers. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you need to be part of, those circles where people are like, good on you. You've
I
lost
love
2 pounds, didn't eat any carbs, focused only on protein,
that. Your
yay,
support group.
that sort of thing, But if you're just alone doing your own thing, sometimes you do need that extra help and
Yeah.
accountability circle. So
I love
there'll be
that.
different things for different people. But I think
Mm.
the first thing is obviously that clarity, working through that ABCD framework about,
Yeah.
what is it I need to kind of be letting go of? What are my
Mm.
non-negotiables, the things I need to
Yeah.
leave behind, and the things that
Yeah.
I need to focus on going forward? And how will it serve me? Because, when
Mm.
you're clear about, the value, things that will bring to your life, I think that's even better. It's enough of a draw. But then, as I said, some people will need that little bit of extra help, and that's okay.
I love that. And as you were speaking, I'm going to read from Matthew 5. I'll start from Matthew 5, verse 14 says, you are the light of the world,
Wow.
and a city on a hill cannot be hidden. It says, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket.
Exactly.
Instead, they set it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house.
Yeah.
And the word says in verse 16, in the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. I think that's what we're all working towards.
Well,
Letting
absolutely.
light shine, becoming a person that sparkles. And when God talks about the word here, it talks about you don't light a lamp and put it under, but the purpose of a light is to illuminate everything around it. And it's knowing that what you do, how you show up in life, is a light. You're illuminating people's lives, and you're giving God glory in the process, right? And God has equipped us with the word that we need to focus. I'm focusing on letting my light shine. What is my light? I need to identify it. And your light is being dimmed or being put under a bushel or being put under somewhere hidden when those things in life are weighing you down, the things that you're involved in, people around you that are not allowing your light to shine.
Exactly.
They're not allowing you to sparkle.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not being seen, and you're not glorifying God. You're not being your authentic self, and your life is not illuminating the world with your gifts, your passion. And that's what God's trying to get us to get to the point where your light is shining, where you're being that person that knows who you are. Every day you're illuminating your life. And we don't think about it. We don't think about what God's trying to tell us about our ability, the things that He's done for us, how He wants us. God wants to give us the soft life. He really does. He wants us to have the soft life.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because we are the salt of the earth. We make it tasty. We add flavor. And that's why I also talk about the fact that obviously you don't just do that within the four walls of a church. You go out into the market and you spread that flavor, you spread that taste. And obviously in Living Smarter, for some people, it will be, reading a book, it will be coaching. But for some people, there are some real structural barriers. So whether that's poverty, whether that's unemployment, whether that's housing. So also think about, so what's our role in making life better for those people? Recently, I was in Africa. I found so exciting. And I went out to visit an orphanage. I was only there for a few days, but I went out to visit an orphanage, and I'd arranged beforehand for some local doctors to meet me there. We screened about 108 children for their eye health. And obviously the results were in kind of 3 main groups of results. So there were the children that were absolutely fine, what we discovered from the screening. There was another group that they had some minor ailments that were treated on the day. There was a third group that will need to follow up in that clinic. But then also, we had this massive, panda with the children. There was entertainment. There were also a number of items that were brought, to support the children. But again, it's, how can you add value to other people's lives? How can you show that generosity of Christ? It can't be all about you. Purpose cannot be all about you. It's basically how you impact, the world. How do you show up, actually add value, for the sake of our Lord? Because when you think about Esther, and it's interesting, when I gave this example, when I was in New York, some of the young people chuckled, and it was quite funny. I mean, she could have got to the palace as the wife of the king, and she could have said, hang on,
I've arrived.
I'm here.
Yeah.
My bone straight weave, actually about 32 inches. I've got my acrylic nails, I've got my mini dress, I've got my like that. She could have done all of that and thought, I'm here. Goodbye, everyone.
I'm safe. Yeah.
Exactly. But obviously, she realized that, that was not her purpose.
To whom much is given.
Exactly. Much is expected. And she was there, obviously, to help and to save her people, the Jewish people. And, thank God, she was able to realize that and do that, and not just focus on herself. Because obviously, if she had decided that she was just going to focus on herself, as the Bible says, the Lord can raise up, someone else.
Yeah.
Why would you want that to happen? So.
Yeah, and we forget that. We forget that we live our lives in light of God. And how do we stay aligned to God's will and not just self-indulgence? Where's the balance? How do we stay aligned to making sure, because that's the very thing that got Saul out of her. King Saul, he decided to do his own thing. God gave him some clear instructions, and God said, David was considered a man after God's heart. He always wanted to please God, whereas Saul was like, well, this is about me right now. Moses, who was serving faithfully, had a moment of anger, and God's like, what are you doing? I told you, not to strike the rock. And he went and just decided to display himself. And how do we just stay with God and just in alignment and not just feel like,
clear.
Yeah,
I've arrived. What matters, and then sticking to that. And also, making sure, things like iron sharpeneth iron, as the Bible says, the conversation we're having right now, we're sharpening each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is great. Reading the Word of God, so regularly reading the Word of God and making sure that we're nourishing our spirit, nourishing our souls. There's so much within the Word of God, principles and, all sorts, obviously within that. And, just that praying, communicating regularly with the Father, praise, worship can lift any kind of atmosphere. So there's so much that we can do. And there's also something about praying for discernment, that wisdom, because sometimes we're in situations where it may not be immediately apparent,
obvious,
what we need to do, and we need to pray for that discernment so that we can make those really wise decisions, consistently, because we need to do it consistently. Life is a series of decisions, isn't it?
No, you're right. You're right. And I want to lean in a little bit on the idea of progress. And I know, you have a great job in the community. You're a director. How do women who want to progress in their careers and their academics, how can they kind of foster that, sometimes even while taking care of their family, putting their own desires first to kind of move forwards, progress their career? Because a lot of women kind of stop and don't really reach some of the higher places in their careers on the ladder. What advice would you give to a woman who feels that God wants them to kind of go in that route? How can they begin to pursue that?
I suppose there are a couple of words that come to mind: intentionality and flexibility. flexibility.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Explain.
So
Yeah.
those words come to my mind. So you might, be in your career and, you're going from day to day, but you need to have a sense of where is it you want to go? So where do you want
Yeah.
to be in 5 years' time, for
Yeah.
example? And it's okay to think that far ahead. So
Yeah.
you might say, 5 years' time, I want to be, a senior manager. So what are the things that I need to be doing now
No. Yeah.
to make sure that I can be a senior manager in 5 years' time?
Yeah.
Are there some additional qualifications? Do I need to do a secondment in this other area over here to get a bit more experience? Do I need a coach, a transition coach, career coach?
Mm.
Do I need some other kind of coach? Do I need a mentor?
Intentional decisions. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and then that will help you to kind of root your life. And actually, there might be some, frivolous things that you no longer have time for because you're
Yeah.
focusing on these other things.
Sacrificing. Yeah. For your future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And some of that might be, well, actually, doing some things that others might go, oh my God, can't believe you did that. So, for example, there might be a job come up in some other parts of the country, and it might well be that for a bit of time you need to take up that job because,
Yeah. It'll
it's a
help you in
different
your
kind of
purpose too.
experience
Yeah.
again that will help you in that
Part of the
journey.
plan. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that then touches on the other word I mentioned, which is the flexibility, not
Mm.
being so rigid, because sometimes, God brings opportunities our way and we need to
Yeah.
just think, well, actually, this is a really great opportunity. Let me take that. But there's also that flexibility of being clear that you're in seasons.
Mm.
And sometimes you're in a particular season where you need to focus on these things over here, which are very much around your life, whether that's, a pregnancy, children, husband. Do you see what I mean? And it
Yeah.
comes back to that analogy of the cooking and the four rings,
Mm.
which one are you turning up and turning a bit down? So,
Yeah.
some of that is quite dynamic, but you'll have the overall direction of travel that,
Yeah.
5 years' time, this is where I want to be. And
Yeah.
sometimes the road is not always linear to that. Sometimes it's like this,
Yes.
that, like this, like that, and like that. And you need to cultivate resilience and rest.
Mm.
So what's in your
Yeah.
resilience bank? How are you
Yeah.
supporting yourself? How are you conserving your energy?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's going on holiday, nurturing your creativity. I love writing. I've loved writing since I was a little girl. And so that
Awesome.
really helped me in terms of balance. Sometimes I'll just say, well, I'm going to write a short story, and within overnight or in a few hours I've written
Yeah.
it. And I just love it. That helps me in terms of my creativity. For some people, it's, they like, doing makeup. Sometimes they like, teaching, finding different ways of teaching. I remember when I was, little, growing up in London, with my sisters, we'd line up the dolls. We'd say we're doing school for the dolls, and we'd just be, teaching the dolls, in different ways,
Yeah.
sister would be interpreting, she'd be like, okay, I'm going to be, Beth the ragdoll today, and this is what she says. So, just had fun, and it's
Yeah.
okay, even as adults to think about, okay, so how are we going to have fun? We
Mm.
all work. What are
No
those
play.
things
Yeah.
we're doing? Yeah, to give back. And one of the things I discuss with women that I coach, because sometimes they might say, well, I'm not sure, in my day job, it's a bit complex.
Yeah.
I have all these values. I don't think I can, translate my values in this kind of cutthroat environment.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
I need to keep the job because I've got bills to pay. Well, there's
Yeah.
something about, what else, could you be doing in your portfolio life to express some of those values? It could well be that you're also involved, in your spare time or volunteer time with a charity,
Yeah.
or you're in a food bank where you're helping, to give food parcels to people that show up in the food bank. So
Yeah.
again, all of these things are part of living that more rounded, more
Mhm.
balanced life that
Yeah.
speaks to the entirety of our values, not just a few of them.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And how can we draw from our community? Because it's weird, because I always say we were created to be in communities, and some people do family and communities really well.
Yeah.
Some people know how to integrate. They can call and say, oh, I need this, I need that. Other people like me, however, I've struggled with one, delegating, and two, kind of just, I go to church, but not everybody's my best friend. I know there won't be. I don't ask for things. I'm not very good at asking for help. I'm not very good. So I've always been someone that's been a part of the community, but I've always been slightly excommunicated at the same time. Like, I'm there, but I'm not fully integrated. I see women with like groups of friends, and sometimes it's good because they can benefit. Oh, sis, would you do this for me? I feel like I necessarily have that all the time. I have people that I can lean on. So one, how do we not use our community in a negative way of the, like you rightly said, not just checking in when you need something, but you have to give to be able to draw from them. You have to be a part of it. You can't just, someone can't just come in and say, oh yeah, I want this. They're like, where are you coming from? But when you're integrated in the community, you're pouring into the community, you're receiving, how do we first of all understand how important it is? Like they say, it takes a village to raise a child. How important it is to
Absolutely.
have good community friends that you can
Yeah.
rely on,
Yeah.
family, that environment of trust, people that you can be vulnerable with, and knowing who you're. There's a book written by a pastor called Dr. Bob Alonge, and he calls it The Company and the Crowd.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, Jesus
Wow.
knew who the crowd were. The crowd came to feed off his gifts and the miracles and stuff, but his company were his community, the people he hung out with, the disciples that he trusted, the people he could be himself with, who he could show
Yeah.
his true self with. So even the Lord needed community. As much as he was mentoring them, he was a part of them as well. So how can we as humans, we're so independent, self-dependent, I can do it all. How do we learn to trust people? How do we let people in, let them help?
Yeah, and I think there is something about nourishing those relationships as well.
Absolutely.
And then obviously seeing that unfold. So for example, you plant a seed, and you're using your Miracle Grow, all your different
Yeah.
to try and get that to flourish. And then you're seeing it grow and just look so beautiful day by day. But you're thinking, well, actually, that's quite a good flower there. It's
Yeah.
how we nourish those
Mm,
relationships. You don't have to be friends with everyone. And there is
yeah.
something about, so within the book, I talk about what I call a network audit, because sometimes you're just going to have to ask yourself some hard questions. Is this person
Yeah.
to my life?
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, a source of toxicity, in which case, may
Might
not
just put
be
them
as
on the back
close
burner.
exactly, or even further
Yeah.
than a back burner. But there is something about just being very intentional about, just nourishing those relationships. And it's okay to receive. It's okay to
Yeah.
accept, we're not superwomen. We will
Yeah.
need that help. So I've always been, someone, I'm quite friendly, I can be
Yeah.
bubbly, I have friends, but I'm also someone that I don't like to impose on people. I
Yeah,
don't
you're
want
like me like
to
that. Yeah.
ask people
Yeah.
unnecessarily. But I
Yeah.
learned over time that it's sometimes these things are symbiotic and give and take. So certainly,
Mm.
my children were much younger, and I talk about in the book. There's the example of I think it was 2007 or thereabouts. I was
Mm.
doing a really important course, and then the babysitter had just cancelled.
Oh God,
I
yeah.
had to take all my children with me to central London because that
Wow.
was the last day, of the course. And I came back and I said, right, no, it's not happening again. And you
Yeah.
just end up, look, you need to be really intentional about, those concentric
Yeah.
circles, who are the people that you can call on.
Reliable. Yeah.
And then also people that you can help as well, because some of this is going to be quite symbiotic. And I'm not saying that you do things hoping that at some point they will do something back to
Yeah.
you.
It's transactional. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at the point in time, this will just be really natural because you're
Yeah.
nourishing. It's like a plant. You're nourishing and growing that plant. You know, in a way that will, add value, not just for them, but for you as well. So some of this is
Making time,
incremental.
yes, making
Yeah.
time for those relationships to
And
grow and
it's
foster.
making those in-depth connections as well as the surface ones as well
Mm,
sometimes, rather than everything just being like a butterfly flitting in and out. Sometimes you're going to have to make those deep and meaningful connections that stand the test of time. That's
mm,
really important as well. And it comes back to what I said earlier about discernment, because that's another area where discernment is incredibly
yeah,
important, because, you know, people bring blessings into our lives. Again, some people bring some challenges.
yeah, they bring a
So
storm.
it, and it's just having that discernment to, make sure that the people around you are adding value and you're adding
And
value
they're
to them.
for you, yeah, and the people are for you,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
you learn that as well, and
By their fruits you shall know them.
yeah, and getting over trust issues. When I think a lot of time women
Yeah,
have trust, well, these people have been hurt in the past, and
yeah,
those things can limit us. Just because person A hurt you, you're now extra guarded, and you don't
yeah,
trust people. You don't allow people in who can actually help add value to your life and foster that experience of community, because it wasn't always right when you trusted somebody. But it doesn't mean you don't need community. You shouldn't. I say we make up narratives and we
yeah,
tell ourselves things like, I don't need anybody, I can do it by myself.
yeah,
When you
yeah,
start saying things like that, you've made your life even more difficult, because now you've put extra pressure on yourself
yeah,
to always show up for yourself, by yourself. Whereas, I always believe that we should affirm things like, okay, I may not have been able to trust that person, but I need trustworthy people in my life. Now you're clear of
exactly.
what you actually need. That person wasn't good, but that doesn't mean I don't need anybody. The
Yeah,
response should not be, I
yeah.
don't need anybody.
Can't
The
be a
response is,
blanket. No.
yeah, I
No.
need quality people in my life
Right.
who are going to be for me, with me, and I can be for and with them as well. And I think those things are intentional, because I think about some of the women that I know that are in circles of friends that I can see from the outside that is toxic for them. But they're in those uh, friendship groups, maybe because of the duration of time that they've known them, or just because they don't have like the wherewith to kind of just do life on your own for a season if you have to. If your group of friends are always
Yeah.
kind of just, you're leaving feeling depleted. You're leaving feeling like, oh, they'll say something, or they'll laugh at you, they'll
Yeah.
mock you, and I've
And
seen it
that's not
happen.
you. Then that's the
Yes, so many times. But like, oh, there's my friends, or any joke, and you're making
yeah, yeah, yeah.
excuses for that kind of behavior. That's not community, and we
Mm,
need to be
no, it's
clear
not.
about, yeah, what is good community,
And I
you know
suppose it's just being amongst people that help you thrive, not just survive,
absolutely.
and fuel your sense of purpose. And you do
Mm,
the same for them.
yeah,
It's symbiotic, basically. And obviously, there are different definitions of community. Again, coming back to those circles, because
yeah,
for some people it will be a geographical community,
yeah,
and you're making sure that you're giving back to your community, so it's a better place
mm,
for everyone. But there is something that I wanted to pick up on, and I think this
yeah,
concept of validation, because a lot of us, unfortunately, are constantly looking outside ourselves for validation. And I
yeah,
think that causes quite a bit of those, being involved
mm,
in situations where you
yeah,
don't think it's okay for you to be able to tell yourself, actually, it's fine. You know, I don't need those 10 people over there to tell me I look good. I don't need
yeah,
that person over there to say what I've done,
yeah,
doing.
yeah,
If
yeah.
people can just step back from some of that,
I love that.
constantly looking for external validation, and
Yeah,
actually being okay, with yourself and with your own company sometimes,
yeah,
then that helps reduce some of that dependency, and almost for some people, unfortunately, verges on a bit of desperation to
yeah, mm,
belong and be involved in certain circles. And sometimes those
yeah,
circles are not good for you. And there's something, some people call the mushroom
mm,
syndrome, where you've got a group of people and they're okay as long as everyone's kind of being kept down. But
yeah.
the moment one person wants to,
Rises up. Yeah,
thrive, achieve their
that's a
potential, then
problem.
all hell
Yeah,
breaks loose. So we just need to be conscious of all of that. But it all comes back to just being really clear about your purpose, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Why are you on this earth? What is it
Yeah.
you're here to do? How are
Yes.
you to impact the world, show up for people, for communities? Because
Yeah.
that is almost laser-like in helping you decipher, actually, these people over here, not necessarily good for all of that. You know, this set of things over here, not necessarily to be prioritized at this time. It just
Yeah.
helps. It's a bit of a North Star, isn't it?
Yeah. And you outgrow communities at times. You outgrow people. If you're what was
Seasons.
serving you, yeah, because at the time you might have had the same mindset. You guys were thinking alike,
Yeah,
but you went on a journey. You began to grow. You began to develop, and then
yeah.
you're passionate about bringing your community along with you, and they just don't get it. They're not for you anymore. They're no longer understanding you. So now you're either going to dumb yourself down to fit into that group, or you need to say to yourself, I've outgrown this mindset. I've outgrown these practices. And then you find people, and I think that whole
It's doing with
intentionality,
kindness, and
you
it's doing
out
it with
100%.
kindness
Yeah,
and
100%.
compassion. And I think there's something, Sister Esther, about that whole concept of a train. Do you see what I mean? So you're on a train,
Mm,
and
yeah,
let me pick one of my favorite places, Liverpool.
Paddington.
Liverpool. And so you're heading to Liverpool, and you've got some people on your train, and it's clear that they
Yeah,
will not be going to Liverpool with you. And they're meant to come off at, let's just pick a place, Milton Keynes, for example. And you look and you get to Crewe and they're still on the train. And you're being polite and like, but they're not meant to be here. They're not meant to be
yeah,
Liverpool. And you're going, making them a cup of tea, having the
yes,
polite small talk.
yeah.
They're
You're still
taking
enabling them on the journey.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
taking your time, your resources, your energy. You need
yeah.
to get off that train so you can focus on getting to Liverpool with the people that
Mm,
need to be on that
yeah,
journey
are
with you.
going.
So just
Yeah,
breaking it down into that kind of metaphor makes it
yes.
quite stark, doesn't
I
it?
love
So
that.
yeah.
I love that. And that's intentional as well. And I think what
Yeah.
you've done for us today is the whole idea you've awakened the person, right? And I think that's been we're sleeping and we don't know we're sleeping through life. And intentionality is being fully awake and fully engaged in every aspect of your life, thinking about,
Conscious decisions. And
yes,
using
and
time,
how
our
you're
greatest
making that.
resource, appropriately.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. No, you're right. And we pick up habits. And I think part of being an adult, I think Paul says, when I was a boy, I thought like a boy, I behaved like a boy. But when I became a man, I started to think as a man. And
Excellent.
sometimes you could age, but your mindset,
Mm.
right? I had this when I was young, I used to eat a lot of sweets. I'm talking packs of Haribo. I'd forego lunch and dinner. I'd eat a whole pack of Haribos.
Oh
And I
wow.
kept doing that into my adult life. But one day I said to myself, funny enough, the grace of God, it hasn't had too much of a detrimental impact on my physical health in terms of diabetes and stuff. I've been fortunate. But one day I felt the Lord say to me, you're grown now. Like you can't be eating sweets for dinner. I was like, oh God. And I realized that I had to get to the point where I say, oh, this is what I did in my youth because I didn't know. But now that I know better, I should be doing better. I
Yeah.
should be making better decisions. But sometimes our subconscious behaviors and patterns of ways of thinking that we've grown up with that we've never challenged. The cultures and the things that we've adopted in our culture that we've never challenged and looked at and said, actually, does this serve who I am? Does this
People
serve where
pleasing.
I'm going?
And
Yeah,
people pleasing as well.
yeah. We
Mm.
want to remain and it's
Yeah.
about being bold enough to identify who you are. And you might be different from your past. I have this joke with my friends. So I grew up in East London in Hackney. I say to them, oh, I'm middle class now. So mind how you address me. I'm like, oh, I'm middle class now. So it's an ongoing joke. But I think to myself, actually, I've changed. I'm no longer loyal to the ghetto. Like some people, like, yeah, we're going back. I'm like, I don't identify with that former person because I lived that culture. I was like, but God
Yeah.
has changed. Yeah, I've grown. I've become a completely different person from who I
Amen.
was, from the environment that
Amen.
I was raised in, because you just didn't know better. You're a product to some degree of your environment. So I love this whole idea. If you're gonna show up as your authentic self, you have to take off all the layers that actually are not you. And you need to be able to get to the point where you identify who you are and say, actually, this has been imposed. I don't believe these values. Actually, this doesn't align with me. And just consciously, intentionally trying to find the person that you truly are, that is made up of the values, the boundaries, and the choices that you have chosen, that you identify with, and those things. And oftentimes, God leads us to our true. So, in fact, that's what He wants to do. He wants to show you who you really are without having to people please, as you mentioned, without having to feel guilty. I'm unapologetic for who I am, the way I am, because I've taken off all the layers that have made me feel uncomfortable, but I've subscribed to them in order to fit in. And now, like, I'm actually comfortable being what seems awkward to you. Yeah, I'm in my own skin. I'm comfortable. And I think it was last week I said to myself, oh, I like being gentry. It was weird because you start to kind of define who you are. And I said, no, I like the whole, I think I prefer my gentry self.
Oh, wow.
I want to cultivate more of a gentry character. Gentle strength. I thought to myself, oh, I like that. Yeah, still be formidable and strong, but it doesn't have to be in your face and boisterous and forceful. You can say no without shouting. You can say no with a smile on your face, and your no is still a no. Yeah, and it's not, and I think I love that for women because we just don't really get time to think about that. And I think rightly so, the best of us do that early in life.
Yeah. And it's okay to be feminine, to be that, we want to be. You don't have to be a certain way because you want to be X, Y, Z. It's okay to be authentic and to be you.
Yeah, I love that. Dr. Nkechi, thank you. You've been amazing. And before we close up, let's talk about mastering decision making before we wrap up. That is the ABCD of smart living.
Yeah.
How does mastering decision making absolutely get us to where we're trying to be? And what is the process of that, just before we round up?
I mean, I think there's something, and obviously it might differ from one person to another, but there is something about being informed by what's gone before. So remember ABCD framework. So being informed by accepting your limitations. You're not Superwoman.
Yeah.
You will need some help. Assessing how you're using your time and your energy. What are your priorities? What are your boundaries? Those terms of reference for how people should deal with you. And what are your values? And, what's your community and your connections that you can draw on? And all of that is the helpful information to draw on in terms of making some of those smart decisions.
Yeah.
So it's just making sure that those decisions are well informed. And there are a whole plethora of tools that can be used, whether that's Eisenhower's, whether it's Pareto's, which I describe, within the book. But it's just making sure that you haven't done those ABC in a vacuum. It's towards making sure you can be more intentional in terms of those actions. Okay, I've realized these are my values. I'm really clear about that. I'm really clear about my priorities aligned with my purpose. I'm really clear about these things over here. They don't add value. They're not really good use of my time. I'm going to kind of delegate them. These other people are going to help me with these things, whether it's mowing the lawn or whatever. And so therefore, the decisions I'm making are for my life. Because life is a series of decisions. Otherwise, we're stumbling around and life is happening to us by default, which is intentional. And we want intentional living.
Oh my God, thank you so much. Where can people pick up the book Sparkle, the ABCD of Smart Living? Where can we pick that up from? Plug it for us.
So it's on Amazon. I think this one with this cover is on Amazon. Then there's a special edition which I did before I went to New York, which is quite blingy.
Oh, nice.
And if people wanted exactly the same content, but one has a blingy cover, if people wanted the blingy cover, they can get in contact with you.
Yeah.
And we'll have a chat.
Are you available for speaking at events and conferences? How can people kind of connect with you to get you out to come and just inspire them? You've been so inspirational today.
Oh, bless you. I think it depends. I mean, I'm incredibly busy, as you
Busy.
can imagine.
I know.
But yeah,
You are.
it depends. But obviously I've got my social media, and I'm
Yeah.
contactable, in terms of supporting women. I do quite a bit of coaching in my personal life, all for
Yeah.
free. I'm really passionate about that. So if there's an opportunity to kind of add value, support communities, do something, in line, with Christianity or similar community development,
Giving back,
then
yeah.
do get in touch. Just send me a direct message, and I'll see if what's the art of the possible in the context of me being
Making
effective.
the time, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Dr. Nkechi, thank you so much. You've been an
So
absolute
much.
blessing. I'm just going
Thank you.
to finish off the rest of the program and say goodbye to our viewers today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Guys, what an amazing, amazing time with Dr. Nkechi. I absolutely love her spirit. Very inspiring, wonderful woman. And I think that, she has so much value to give to women. And I know, you might be a young woman on your journey. You could be single, you could be married, just starting out, or could be, at a point in your life where you think, I want to make some real conscious changes. And as I mentioned before, we're coming into a new year. This is usually the time we think about our resolutions and things to do, but it's time to make life resolutions as opposed to yearly resolutions. We want to go for the long term and what we're going to do. So thank you so much for joining me today for the Wise Women podcast. I hope you got so much value out of that. Remember, you can always come back and keep watching this. It's going to be on YouTube at Estah TV. It'll be there. All our podcasts are there. Feel free to go back and listen. The Bible says faith comes by hearing, continually hearing and hearing the word of God. And today we have shared some insights of how God awakens us through each other, through values, through boundaries. All of it is found also in the word of God. So guys, stay blessed, look after yourself and those around you, and make sure you are here next week for the Wise Woman podcast. God bless you.